In this video, we're going to go through examples 3.16 to 3.20 from your book. If you'd like to follow along, open the Chapter 13 classwork.xlsx workbook from My Courses and click on the EX 13.16 to 13.20 worksheet tab. In examples 13.16 to 13.20, we're going to look at some scenarios and then look at the sensitivity report. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to enter the model in the regular solver and use the scenario manager to evaluate our 4 scenarios. So I'm going to click Data, and over on the right hand side in the Analyze group, I'm going to click Solver. If you do not see the solver, click File, and then Options. On the left hand side, click Add-ins. Next to Manage Excel Add-ins, click Go. And make sure that the solver add-in is checked. As long as the solver add-in is checked, click OK. When you go back to that Data tab, you will have an Analyze group all the way on the right hand side with a Solver button. So I'm going to click the solver. Our objective is to maximize our total profit. So making sure that I'm in the Set Objective box, I'm going to click on cell D22, the total profit, and make sure my radio button is set to maximize, MAX, max. Now I'm going to click in the box by changing variable cells. Our variable cells are the quantity of Jordanelle and Deercrest. So I'm going to select the range B14 to C14. Now I'm going to have to enter in 4 constraints. So next to where it says subject to the constraints, I'm going to click Add. So our first constraint is for fabrication. Our fabrication hours used has to be less than our limitation of 84. Now because we're running scenarios, instead of typing the number 84, I'm going to use the cell reference D6. So my first constraint is my total fabrication hours, D15, has to be less than or equal to the constraint D6. Now I have 3 more constraints to add, so I'm going to click Add. My second constraint is for finishing, so my finishing hours used, D16, has to be less than or equal to the limitation, cell D7. Now I'm going to click Add. Our third constraint is our market mixture. We want at least twice as many Deercrest as Jordanelle. For that to happen, our excess Deercrest, cell D19, has to be greater than or equal to 0. So I'm going to click cell D19, and I'm going to change that to greater than or equal to 0. Now I'm going to click Add, and our last constraint, B14 and C14, both of our quantities has to be greater than or equal to 0, because we don't want the computer to come up with some strange solution where we have negative 14 Jordanelle and positive 25 Deercrest or something like that. So we're all done. I'm going to click OK. Make sure that you use Simplex LP. LP is linear programming. Everything here is linear because we have no x squareds and no log x and e to the x and those things. So we're all ready. All we have to do is click Solve. Alright, now whether we keep the solver solution or restore the original values, all it's going to do is change the quantity produced, none of the other numbers, and in a little while we'll run a sensitivity report, but for the premium solver, not the regular solver. Now I'm going to click Save Scenario and name this scenario Base Case and click OK. Now I'm going to click Cancel because I don't want to return to the solver parameter dialog box right now. because we need to answer our 4 questions. So the first question is, what happens if our unit profit for Jordanelle goes up by $10? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click in cell B9. If it goes up by $10, it goes from 50 to 60. So I'm just going to type the number 60 in here in cell B9, and now all I have to do is rerun the model. So I'm going to click Solver, making sure that I'm on that Data tab, Data, Solver. Everything's in there. All I have to do is click Solve. So we see over here, it looks like we have exactly the same solution, but I'm going to click Save Scenario, and this one we will call Part 1, and click OK. Now I'm going to click Cancel, because again I'm going to play with the numbers before we run it. In Part 2, they ask what happens if the unit profit of Jordanelle goes down by $10. So now instead of 60, it would go to 40. So in cell B9, I'm just going to type the number 40, and I'm just going to rerun the model. So Data tab, Solver, and then Solve. Now it looks like that changed. Now it looks like we have 0 and 14. So I'm going to click Save Scenario, and this one I will call Part 2. And click OK. Now I will cancel out of this one. In Part 3, they ask what would happen if we have 10 more finishing hours. So I'm going to bring my profit back to the base case. So B9, I'll go back to 50, which was the original problem. And if we increase the finishing hours by 10, it goes from 21 to 31. So in cell D7, I'm going to type 31. And again, this is the advantage. We don't have to edit the constraint because the cell reference is in the constraint. So now all I have to do, making sure that I'm still on that Data tab, click Solver, and then Solve. And now we get 1.6 and 19.6. So I'm going to click Save Scenario. And this scenario I will call Part 3. And click OK. And I'm going to click Cancel. And now in Part 4, they ask for 2 less finishing hours. So we started off at 21. 2 less would be 19. So in cell D7, I'm going to type 19 and run the model for the 4th time. So I'm going to click Solver, making sure that I'm still on that Data tab. Click Solver, and then Solve. Save Scenario, and Part 4. Now the Scenario Manager is not available in the Premium Solver. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Cancel, and on that Data tab, in the Forecast group, I'm going to click What If Analysis and Scenario Manager. I'm going to click Summary, the Summary button, and my result cell is going to be D22, the profit. So I'm going to click OK, and we get a sheet with the Scenario Summary. And we can see the profit for the base case and what happens with each one of the parts. So we can see here that our highest profit would be in Part 3 when we have 10 more finishing hours. Now let's move on to the remainder of the parts of this exercise. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the same model with the Premium Solver. So to do that, I'm going to click Add-ins, and then Premium Solver 2019. That is only available if you purchase the Analytic Solver. So notice, because I already set up the original solver, that everything's in there. So if I start off with the regular solver, the information gets transferred to the Premium Solver. But if you hadn't done that, we would single click Objective and click Add, And our objective, we just click on cell D22. Just single click variables. Don't worry whether they're normal or recourse. Just single click variables and click add. And our variables are B14 and C14. And then finally click constraints and click add, and it will put all of the constraints where they belong. So we've entered all of our constraints. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to click solve. And at this point I can skip the guidance. We've got our solver solution. I probably should have put my hours back to 21 before I did this, but it's not a big deal. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to single click sensitivity on the right hand side under reports, and I'm going to click OK. I'm now going to click close, and I'm going to click my sensitivity report 1. So now we're going to look at all of the different parts of the sensitivity report. So we can see over here that for our objective cell, it ends up being $855 is going to be our maximum profit when we've optimized this model. So we have over here our quantity produced Jordanelle and our quantity produced Deercrest. So now I'm looking at the decision variable cells. So first of all, we see over here reduced cost. Reduced cost is 0. Reduced cost is what would happen is if one of these cells were 0. If either the quantity Jordanelle was 0 or the quantity Deercrest was 0, this reduced cost would be how much the coefficient would have to be increased or decreased to make it worthwhile to produce one of those. So in a moment I'll rerun the model where we get the 0 and the 14, I believe it was, and then we'll see the reduced cost. So now over here we have allowable increase and allowable decrease. So what this allowable increase means over here, we have 1e to the 30. So this objective coefficient could go to 60 or 70 or 80 or 90, but it's not going to change that final value. It's not going to change the 4.75, and I have a feeling it's because of that market mixture. Now we have allowable decrease. So we start off with 50. Our allowable decrease is about 6.67. So what happens is that if this goes down by 7, let's say this goes down to 43, then what's going to happen is this mix over here, these two final values will change. It's not going to tell us how much, but it will change. So now we see the value of Deercrest. We wouldn't have a reduced cost unless the final value was 0. So with Deercrest, the objective coefficient is 65. It makes a profit of $65 a unit. Now, if that profit goes up to 75, this mix will not change, but if it goes up the tiniest bit above 75, that's that allowable increase. And we have allowable decrease. It can go down. It looks like it can even have a negative price. It can go down $90, and this market mix will not change. This final value will not change. Now down here, we have our constraints. So over here, we have our final values, 54, 19, and 0. What the shadow price tells us is if one more unit of the constraint was available, how much profit would change. So right now we only had 19 finishing hours available. If we changed it from 19 to 20, the shadow price tells us that profit would increase by $45. So here's our constraints. Our H is right hand side. So our constraint for fabrication was 84. For finishing, it's 19, and market mixture greater than or equal to 0. So we have the same allowable increase and allowable increase. That 84 can increase basically forever. So we could have 200 fabrication hours available or 700. It's not going to change the solution. But those 84 hours can decrease by a little less than 30 hours. Once it decreases by 30 hours, then that solution will change. We have the same with finishing. Now finishing has a shadow price of $45. 19 hours were available. Allowable increase is 10. So if we went from 19 to 29, basically the solution would not change. Allowable decrease is 19. So if we went down to 0, basically the solution would not change. And there we have our market mixture for excess deer crust. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rerun part 2, because in part 2 we made 0 of the Jordanelle. So I'm going to go back to the example 3.16 to 3.20 worksheet tab. I'm going to put my hours back to 21, so I'm going to click in cell D7 and type 21. And in part 2, our profit of Jordanelle went down by 10, so I'm going to change it to 40. Now I'm going to click Add-ins and Premium Solver. Everything is already in there. I'm going to click Solve. I'm going to skip the guidance. Notice now I have the 0 and 14. So very quickly, I'm going to click the sensitivity report. So single click that sensitivity report and then click OK. So now I'm going to click Close on my solver parameter. I have a sensitivity report too, and I'll make that a little bigger to make it easier to see. Now notice for Jordanelle, we actually have a reduced cost, and our reduced cost is negative 3.33. So that means that we have to reduce the objective coefficient by negative 3.33, which means increase it by 3.33 in order to change that final value away from 0. So we'd have to at least make this objective coefficient 43.3333 in order for us to even begin making the Jordanelle. Well, hopefully that explained all of our solver and sensitivity reports.